24, crossing over.
What did he say, Mom?
What did he say, Mom? Natalie whispered urgently because no one was supposed to make phone calls from their rooms in the morning. Dr. Rose said not to get your hopes up, her mother said. When she sighed, Natalie braced herself. Seeing the Christmas lights is not unusual. There may be tiny bits of vision left to one side. A temporal island, he called it. Natalie held the phone to her ear, and felt her heart drop down into the soles of her feet. Nat, are you there?
Yes.
She finally replied.
So, none of my vision is coming back?
Dr. Rose said that little bit may come and go, but it doesn't mean anything, Nat. It doesn't mean anything. Unbelievable. How could it not mean something? Natalie felt as though her emotions were on a roller coaster, chugging uphill one day, then plunging downhill the next. A temporal island. Another disappointment. You'd think she'd be used to it by now. Are you ready? Miss Audra asked. A simple enough question. Natalie shrugged. But the answer was no, actually. She wasn't ready. She would never be ready. She was just going through the motions. Natalie, come on. This is important. This is your test. You're basically walking by yourself to the Forestville shopping center. I'll be with you, but I'm not supposed to say much.
I understand,
Natalie responded. By now, they'd done the entire walk several times. Natalie wasn't afraid nor excited. She just felt flat about it. She couldn't even fake enthusiasm. After finding out the lights didn't mean anything, she hadn't been able to rebound. All the way to the traffic light on Dunbar Avenue, Natalie tried to listen carefully as she swept her cane, moving forward. At the traffic light, however, after she pressed the button for the traffic light and waited at the curb, the nonchalance evaporated. She listened as traffic directly in front of her stopped. She listened to her right. She listened as traffic to her right moved. This was her opportunity to cross. Extending her cane, she tapped 3 times to signal her intention, but her feet suddenly filled with lead, and her wrist froze. Miss Audra said nothing. Natalie took another breath, then crashed through her fear to move her wrist. One tapped her cane again.
Come on, you've done this before. It's not that hard. Just do it and get it over with.
But the sound of her own breathing filled her head, and her heart thumped rapidly, high in her chest. All at once, traffic in front of her was moving again. When traffic to the right had stopped, she had lost her opportunity. Her shoulders sagged. She would have to wait for another cycle. Embarrassed, she pressed the button on the traffic light again and stood stiffly, biting her bottom lip. A few minutes passed. Miss Audra didn't speak. When traffic was in front of Natalie again, Natalie stopped. Natalie again stopped, and it was when it was time to go. Natalie extended her cane into the road and tapped 3 times. She took a deep breath and forced one foot off the curb, and then pulled the other cinder block foot behind it. Miss Audra would tell her if a car was coming, right? Another step. She wouldn't let Natalie kill herself. No way. She'd get fired. One more step and then she was moving, really moving, her cane sweeping quickly until she reached the other side. Good, Miss Audra said. Relief poured out of Natalie. And her heart thumped madly. For the next half mile, Natalie knew there would be 3 smaller streets to cross, but no big intersections with traffic lights. Then, just before the entrance to the shopping center, a large utility box would be on the right. A dog barked, startling Natalie, and she jumped, bumping into Miss Audra. She hadn't run into any dogs before. It's okay, Miss Audra assured her, putting a hand on Natalie's arm. He's fenced in, but remember, don't act afraid. It would only excite a dog more. Now, lots of houses coming up on your left, remember? Most have fenced yards and short sidewalks leading up to their steps. Natalie appreciated the reminder and continued until the sound of a plastic-wheeled tricycle thundering toward them ground their progress to a halt. She stepped to one side and held her cane in front of her. Megan, an older woman's voice. Stop! You're scaring those people. The noisy tricycle stopped. What's wrong with her? A small voice asked. Why does she have that stick, Mommy? Oh, shh, the mother said, urging the child on. It's all right, Miss Audra whispered. Pretty soon that big cemetery comes up. Remember, it'll be quieter there. Natalie had tried to make a mental map of the streets, the houses, and the cemetery and the shopping center, and was trying to visualize where she was when her cane caught on something that tripped her. Natalie caught herself before falling and kneeled, gently extracting the item in her way. It felt like an empty pizza box. She shoved it off the sidewalk and continued, but a few steps later, her cane jammed into a large crack and pushed the cane grip into her stomach. Natalie exclaimed, That hurt! It made her a little angry that Miss Audra didn't sympathize. Suddenly the whap against metal. That would be the utility box. The shopping center was just ahead, on the left. All right, said Miss Audra, putting a hand on Natalie's shoulder. You have arrived. Remember, the super fresh is on your left. People will be pushing carts and loading groceries into cars parked along the right-hand side. Remember, go slowly and be careful. There is a lot of elderly people, some of them with walkers who can't move quickly. Beyond the supermarket, Natalie had memorized the series of the stores. The first was the liquor store, then the nail salon, and then the Raven's Nest bar, followed by the Rite Aid pharmacy and the Hallmark store, and finally Parthenon, the Greek restaurant where they were meeting Arnob and his cane instructor, Mr. Gregg, for dinner. The rest of the walk was easy, and when the air suddenly filled with the smell of bread and garlic, Natalie knew they had arrived. It never had felt so good to sit down. A few minutes later, Arnob and Mr. Gregg joined them. Introductions were made. Natalie didn't know Mr. Gregg, and Arnob didn't know Miss Audra. Arnob took a seat beside Natalie, and they reached over under the table He reached over under the table to squeeze her hand. "Hi," he said softly.
Hi.
She replied. She felt a bit uneasy with him touching her that way. Was it because weeks ago she had allowed him to touch her face? Did that mean something more to him than it did to her? Because while it made Natalie feel wanted, and she did enjoy the attention, she didn't think of Arnob as her boyfriend now. Did she interpret things differently? Natalie rubbed her hands on her jeans nervously. These weren't bad feelings, just kind of mixed up feelings. Suddenly, the waiter in there, taking drink orders, was there and suggested they try the new barbecued chicken pizza, which sounded good to all of them. Then, since Arnob was completely the same, done the completely same walk as Natalie, there was a lot of comparing to do. The dog that barked, the hair-raising crossing at the traffic light, the crowds near the supermarket. "And did you hit the crack in the sidewalk?" Arnob asked. "I hit that crack every time." "I hit that crack every time," Natalie exclaimed. "Such a pain," Arnob laughed. "Well, here's to an excellent walk," Miss Audra said. "To Arnob and Natalie. I'm holding my glass for a toast." "2 jobs well done," Mr. Gregg chimed in. No, it wasn't a job well done, and Natalie knew it. She about had heart failure. Crossing that big intersection. Maybe Arnob deserved this pass, but she sure didn't. She would never use it. She didn't even want it. Nevertheless, Natalie lifted her water glass, and somehow they all managed to clink their glasses together in a toast. "I mean it, Natalie. You can do anything you set your mind to," Miss Audra went on. "It's all about self-confidence." "Absolutely," Mr. Gregg agreed. "About the only thing you won't be able to do in your life is drive a car and fly an airplane," Miss Audra added. "Oh, and you probably can't be a surgeon." Natalie grinned and scrunched up her nose. "That's okay," she said. "I never much liked the idea of cutting into people." Mr. Gregg laughed. "Another toast," he said. "Today the Forestville Shopping Center, and tomorrow Thailand or Paris or Vince Venice or Venice. Actually, I would not recommend Venice because of the water. You have been there? Arnob said. Arnob asked. Yes, twice in fact. Once with a friend and once on my own. On your own?
On your own? Are you serious, Mr. Gregg?
You went to Venice on your own, even though you were blind? Arnob was incredulous. Yes, he replied. Mr. Gregg has traveled all over the world. Miss Audra nodded. He just got back from Scotland.
But why?
Natalie asked.
Why travel if you can't see anything?
Good question. I've been asked this many times. And I always remind people that there are many ways to measure beauty other than sight. For example, I can smell the ocean. I can feel the energy of the wind. But Scotland, Mr. Gregg? Arnob asked. Oh, Scotland. Well, the sound of the bagpipes, for one thing, and the accents. There was a hustle and bustle in the pubs, the laughter, and the clinking of the glasses, and the bumpy cobblestoned streets everywhere, and the cold feel of those weathered stone walls and the buildings, and oh, yes, the feel of a cold pint in my hand, and the warm wool tartan around my neck, and the peppery taste of haggis. I don't know. These are not things that require sight. Natalie was astonished at the details he brought to life. You should be a writer, Arnob said. There is a documentary called Blindsight that I want you to hear.
There is a documentary called Blindsight that I want you to hear sometime,
Miss Audra said.
It's about a mountain climber named Eric Wayenmeyer, who is blind. The first blind person to climb Mount Everest, in fact. But Blindsight is not about that adventure. That is a documentary about how he leads 6 blind Tibetan teenagers up a 23,000-foot mountain. Just as Natalie was trying to absorb that incredible information and idea, the pizza arrived. It smelled wonderful. Miss Audra served them each a piece and handed out napkins. It's really hot, she said. Be careful. They enjoyed the pizza. When it was time to pay, Natalie was surprised to hear Arnob offer to take the bill. But it was going to be my treat, Miss Audra said. No, mine, please, Miss Audra. Please let me pay. It is a small thank you for what you and Mr. Gregg are doing. Okay, Miss Audra agreed. How nice. Well, let's see. It comes to $23.15 for all the drinks. Let me get my wallet out, Arnob said. Natalie wondered how he was going to do this. Would he just hand the wallet to Miss Audra and ask her to take what was needed? Here is a 20, he said, and here 3 ones. Okay, 1 dime, yes, and a nickel. Yes, and a $5 bill for the tip. excellent, Miss Audra said. Although that is a penny, that it's a pretty hefty tip. It is okay, Arnob said. It was good service. Great job, Mr. Gregg commented. After the waiter took the money and thanked them, Natalie leaned over to Arnob. Okay, she said, so you have a system. How did you know that you're 20? How did you know you're 20 from your ones? Oh, Mr. Gregg taught me this, Arnob said. It's not hard. A bill simply is folded in half as if it's a $1 bill. He pushed a folded bill into her hand. Folded in half a second time, meaning it is a $5 bill. Folded in half yet again into a small square. It means this a 10, a 20 bill. It is folded in half lengthwise, the long way. And if you are lucky enough to have a 50, then it's folded into a triangle. What about the change? Natalie asked. Easy, Arnob told her. Quarters have ridges. A dime is a small quarter, like pennies and nickels are smooth edges. The penny is smaller than the nickel. So there was a system, Natalie realized. It was time to go. Both Natalie and Arnob reached beneath the chairs for their folded canes. Natalie pulled on her jacket. Back at school, Miss Audra gave Natalie a hug, but Natalie's arms hung limp at her side. She had gotten through the evening, but didn't exactly feel encouraged by it. The truth was that she wished she was home with her parents, where she knew her way around the house, but wouldn't have to deal with money or put her life on the line crossing a busy intersection. What's wrong? Miss Audra asked. You should be proud of what you've accomplished today. That's just it, Miss Audra. I don't feel proud because I won't be able to do all these I won't be able to do all these things on my own. Look, no one expects you to climb a mountain in Tibet or to visit Scotland next week on your own. It's not just that, though. It's the little everyday stuff. Like Miss Karen takes that bus to work, and Arnob paying for dinner. I can't imagine myself ever doing those things. It's not in me to do that. It is in you, but it takes practice. It takes self-confidence, Miss Audra insisted. You can do it if you want to. I always tell my students at some point that when they leave here, they will need to make a huge decision, and that decision is how they are going to live their lives. Think about this, Natalie. Will you utilize the skills you are learning here to go out and embrace the world? Miss Audra paused. Or will you go home to Mom and Dad and hide out, living scared?